Hello and welcome to the pilot episode of the Off-Air podcast series. I am Tobegani, your host for this podcast. Thank you for making time to listen to our very first episode of our podcast series. Thank you so much. It's been a rather challenging task for me to get this thing off the ground, hey? It wasn't as easy as I had earlier imagined. I know I made a lot of commitments to say to people, we'll have our very first episode soon enough, but I did not meet the target. I know some of you had been waiting and getting tired of waiting for this and to hear what it is and what it sounds like. Well, the good thing is that the waiting is finally over because we are off air at last. Alright, now before we get carried away, let's do some housekeeping first. I know many of you are still in the dark as to what exactly is this thing or whether you should even be listening to it. First of all, this is not radio and this is not a radio show. So you don't have to tune in at a specific time to listen to this. You are at liberty to listen to this from anywhere, whatever time you want to listen to it. It's up to you. So this is what I refer to as audio on demand. Very similar to the concept of video on demand if you are familiar with that. The likes of Netflix, the likes of Showmax, and other platforms. So this is a podcast series which will be delivered weekly. We'll upload a new episode of this every single week. You can either stream the episode online or you can download it and listen later offline. I know you're asking yourself now, what is it that we're going to talk about? What is going to be our subject? What is going to be the subject of this particular series? Well, I felt let's break the rules here. I know many podcasts are about a particular subject. It's either about finance, about politics, or about religion, or any other subject. That's what podcasts are usually about. So I've decided on this show we'll talk about everything and anything. Anything that deserves to be talked about, we'll talk about it on this series. So this one will be driven largely by what is happening on social media. We will draw our content largely from the social media trending topics. So on this particular episode, we'll talk about what has been happening in the previous week on social media. So we'll get most of our content from social media. So let's talk about things that you are already talking about. So now we're putting a voice behind your social media. Isn't it? Social media is mostly text and videos, and you don't get to watch all the videos, you don't get to read all the text posts there, but so we can get a voice behind it and you can listen to it in the comfort of your own home or your car when you're driving to work or from work or wherever you're going. So we'll get to put a voice behind what's happening on social media. We'll draw most of our content from there. Of course, sometimes we will deviate, sometimes we'll look at what is actually happening in the news. It's whatever is important that needs to be talked about, we'll talk about it on this particular show. So at some point I sat down and thought about the language and thought to myself, am I ready to do this thing in English? Because it's not my mother tongue, but because I'm trying by all means to get as much audience as possible, so English becomes the obvious language of choice to do this thing. But you understand that English has this tendency of just, for us who are not native English speakers, it has this tendency of running out. It happens, and it can happen to anyone. It can happen anywhere. So if I was thinking to myself, one day it will happen that my English bundles run out. What am I going to do? Because they do run out. They run out in the most awkward places you can imagine. And when you need you're trying to construct a sentence, it's just not happening. Trying to find the words, they are nowhere to be found, and it will humble you, like this one.
There is a saying that the measure of a man is not how he did. That is not how he did, how he died. How he did, it is not how did he die?
Yeah, when it's not your day, it's just not your day, man. Even a simple sentence is just difficult to construct. You just have to admit. Don't be ashamed. Just admit that no, today's not my day. Change the sentence or start afresh until it makes sense. But humble yourself and say, I've run out of my English bundles. Let me calm down. Let me start afresh. And you might think this only happens to certain people, but it can happen to anyone. Just recently, it happened to Fikile Mbalula, the Minister of Transport. You know, Fikile is not a person you can associate with the depletion of English bundles, because he's one of those guys who throws in big words, throws in bombastic words, but just recently was struggling to, not even a sentence, not even a word, and a simple abbreviation. It showed him flames.
Been briefed by the head of RMT's RT. RTMC.
No, but English is ruthless. You know what? It's ruthless. How do you... Hey, the man was struggling. He ended up calling boss. No. It happens. So my biggest fear while doing this thing is that it will also happen to me. But luckily I get to record and listen and edit, cut out the things that I don't want to hear. But it can happen.
You see, some of us don't know English properly.
Can
and
you,
then
Honorable
we
Matisha,
can only come and say,
Honorable
hong,
Matisha,
hong, 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 like that.
Honorable
member.
Matisha,
Yes. Hong, hong, hong.
Honorable Matisha,
Hong, hong,
Honorable Matisha.
That's the only thing that she knows.
Honorable Matisha.
Yes. Thank you.
Honorable Matisha.
Now, back to business. You see, at some point I thought any series, like look at your TV series and stuff like that, has a number of episodes per season. They decide before. That's okay. This series, season 1 will have 10 episodes. So I was thinking to myself, since this is going to be a podcast series as well, I should also decide a number of episodes that we're going to have. But I don't know. At first I thought let's start with 10, and we'll see how it goes. But then I decided against it. I thought, let me get an answer from a former president. How many episodes do you think we're going to do, Mr. Former President?
769, 700. Listen properly. 769,820. And 70.
You know, yeah. Numbers. If it's not English, it's numbers. You know what's funny? Someone in the background says to him, "Iphelele." He also agrees that iphelele, but then he comes back and says, "and 70." No, numbers. And just like English, numbers also have the same effect of humbling anyone. Numbers have the power to humble anyone. Like, who would have thought Musi Maimane could blunder the way he blundered the other day?
44 out of 10 South Africans don't have a job.
Yes.
Come on, Musi, you can't have 44 out of 10. It can't be. And Musi is not even a product of Bantu education, so he has no excuse. I can understand with Ubaba. I mean, he's a product of Bantu education. Well, he's a product of half Bantu education. But this one, a graduate, unacceptable. It's unacceptable. Okay, now let's look at what has been happening on social media for the past week or so. We've only have time for 2 things. We'll just look at 2 things and then we'll wrap up the episode. Well, plenty of things happened on social media. Before we get into the two things that I've decided to talk about, I just want to talk about what 2019 has been in terms of South Africans and relationships, romantic relationships. If you've been following social media comments and posts, you'd notice that it doesn't seem like it's a good year. Hey, it doesn't seem like it's a year of roses and romance. It's been hectic. To a certain extent, people are asking who is the driver of this relationship vehicle, because hey, it's been a bumpy ride so far. Especially if you look at the well-known people and their relationships, it hasn't been a great year so far. If social media is anything to go by. Well, that being said, the first thing that I want to talk about coming from our social media trends is Black Coffee and his wife, Enhle Mbali. They got married, I think, in 2017, but they've been together longer than that. So it so happened that Mbali deleted, I don't know this, but I've heard, I saw also on social media that apparently Mbali deleted her pictures with Black Coffee from her Instagram. Now, I don't know where people get the time to go through people's posts and realize that a picture has been deleted or pictures have been deleted. But yeah, people, the Twitter, the Instagram, FBI and the Scorpions and the Hawks found out that Enhle deleted some pictures of her with Black Coffee and therefore concluded that something is not right. And indeed, they took it to social media, they took it to Twitter and started talking about the fact that Black Coffee is cheating. Not only did they talk about Enhle deleting the pictures, they went as far as finding a mistress, a possible mistress that Black Coffee has been cheating with. And apparently, it's the former wife of well-known French international DJ, David Guetta. Yeah, you people have time, eh? But I just want to make my own comments, make my opinion, just voice my opinion on this issue. If there's anything we've learned from past issues similar to this one, not exactly the same, but kind of in the same WhatsApp group, is that we should not involve ourselves the way we are involving ourselves in people's relationships, especially these well-known individuals. Look at how the issue of AKA and DJ Zinhle panned out. I mean, at some point, people were labeling AKA all sorts of things, and then now they're back together with DJ Zinhle. Now people are blaming Zinhle for going back to her baby daddy. You don't know half the story. And half of the stories that, in fact, most of the stories we're reading on social media are just made up by people who are probably bored and have data to spend, and they're just they're just saying things on social media. So we don't know half of what is happening. In fact, not just half, but more than half of what's happening in those people's relationships. So we can't really judge. Also, the issue Yagam Babe Sotumo and Mampincha. You remember how it panned out? South Africans decided to take sides. Mampincha is a dog. Mampincha is trash. And they wrote an obituary about the relationship between Babes and Mampincha. Look at what's happening now. Babes and Mampincha are happily in each other's arms while you are busy tweeting alone in the cold. So, if anything that I've learned from these things, especially this year, is that sometimes it's better that we leave people's relationships. And, Enhle, that's Black Coffee's wife, has not said anything. But Twitter has decided that Black Coffee is cheating. and they have evidence that he is cheating. We'll see how it goes. But my opinion, my humble 2 cents opinion is that sometimes it's better we do not interfere in people's relationships, because tomorrow these two will be in each other's arms and we'll start now blaming Enhle. And she hasn't said anything. That's the thing. She hasn't said anything. She hasn't said Black Coffee is cheating on me. She hasn't said we're separate. She hasn't said anything. Even Black Coffee hasn't said anything regarding a breakup that is on the cards that some of you are suggesting. People have just been spreading all these sort of things, but we don't know. We'll see how this pans out. But my humble opinion is that sometimes we need to stay out of people's relationships. Only they know what's happening there. Unless they start crying for help, then I think that's when we can interfere. But so far we seem to be just involving ourselves in issues that have nothing to do with us. So grab a chair like mine and sit. As if the relationship drama that's taking place on Twitter and Facebook is not enough. Now, Moja Love TV has introduced its own version of cheaters in South Africa. Hey. What a life changer. Game changer, I should say. Jub is on the loose, guys. Jub is on the loose and he means business. He's out there to get you. And you know what's the best way? Let me share with you a tip on how not to get caught by Jub. Just don't cheat. It's that simple, ne? And he won't catch you. While we're still on Jub and thinking, hey, we must find a way of making sure that we survive this guy. Then they introduced the second one, Mos Makwati, also doing the same job as Jub. No matter how fit you are, Mos will catch you. Mos is a sprinter, man. Mos, that guy runs, hey? And he's wearing a suit. I'm convinced he can run the comrades wearing a suit, that one. Hey, I know. What are you going to do? I mean, as soon as Moss catches you, just surrender, man. You can't. How are you going to run away from Moss? Well, Jub, I mean, look at him. For sure, you can. I can outrun him. But Moss, it's a different animal altogether, Moss. And we should consider sending him to the Olympics. Yeah. Let him go and represent us in the Olympics. Hey, the guy has talent. He can run. Let alone his presenting skills. He's good, but he's an even better runner than presenter. Hey, I know. Stay safe out there. Jub is on the loose. Mos Makwati is on the loose. Well, this has been the pilot episode of the Off-Air podcast series. Thank you so much. And I repeat again and again for making time to listen to this episode. It means a lot to me. That 20 minutes of your time means so much to me. We will get better with time. I know we're a bit rusty for now, but we will get better with time. In the next episode, I'll also share with you our WhatsApp line where you can send in your voice notes if you feel you want to send something to us, or you can also communicate to us. Otherwise, you can also communicate via our Facebook page, Off Air. Just type in Off Air and communicate with us. You can send a message if you want to, you so wish, or you can also post on our wall. Now, soon enough, we will also get a Twitter account in place. We'll put a Twitter account in place so that we can also communicate on Twitter as well. We'll try to infiltrate the social media streets and try by all means to be as accessible as possible to everyone. Now that you have this episode, maybe you have downloaded it, share it with the next person. Share it on your WhatsApp groups, share it on your WhatsApp contact. Make it available to as many people as possible. I'd really appreciate that. Thank you so much. My name is Tobegani, and this has been Off Air.